Kings we were with crowns upon our heads, me and Dravot. Poor Dan, oh poor, poor Dan, that would never take advice, not though I begged of him. Take the whisky, I said, and take your own time. Tell me all you can recollect of everything from beginning to end. You got across the border on your camels, Dravot dressed as a mad priest and you his servant. Do you remember that? I ain't mad yet, but I shall be that way soon. Of course I remember. Keep looking at me, or maybe my words will go all to pieces. Keep looking at me in my eyes and don't say anything. I leaned forward and looked into his face as steadily as I could. He dropped one hand upon the table and I grasped it by the wrist. It was twisted like a bird's claw, and upon the back was a ragged, red, diamond-shaped scar. "No, don't look there. Look at me," said Carnehan. "That comes afterward. But for the Lord's sake, don't distract me. We left with that caravan, me and Dravot playing all sorts of antics to amuse the people we were with. Dravot used to make us laugh in the evenings when all the people was cooking their dinners. And what did they do then? They lit little fires with sparks that went into Dravot's beard, and we all laughed, fit to die. Little red fires they was going into Dravot's big red beard. So funny." His eyes left mine and he smiled foolishly. "You went as far as Jagdallak with that caravan," I said at a venture, "after you had lit those fires? To Jagdallak, where you turned off to try to get into Kafiristan?" "No, we didn't neither. What are you talking about? We turned off before Jagdallak because we heard the roads was good. But they wasn't good enough for our 2 camels, mine and Dravot's. When we left the caravan, Dravot took off all his clothes, and mine too, and said we would be heathen because the Kafirs didn't allow Mohammedans to talk to them. So we dressed betwixt and between, and such a sight as Daniel Dravot I never saw yet nor expect to see again. He burned half his beard and slung a sheepskin over his shoulder and shaved his head into patterns. He shaved mine too and made me wear outrageous things to look like a heathen. That was in a most mountainous country, and our camels couldn't go along any more because of the mountains. They were tall and black. Coming home I saw them fight like wild goats. There are lots of goats in Kafiristan. And these mountains, they never keep still, no more than the goats. Always fighting they are, and don't let you sleep at night." "Take some more whisky," I said very slowly. "What did you and Daniel Dravot do when the camels could go no farther because of the rough roads that led into Kafiristan?" "What did which do?" "There was a party called Peachy Taliaferro Carnehan that was with Dravot. Shall I tell you about him? He died out there in the cold. Slap from the bridge fell old Peachy, turning and twisting in the air like a penny whirligig that you can sell to the Amir. Now they was 2 for 3 halfpence, those whirligigs, or I'm much mistaken and woeful sore. And then these camels were no use, and Peachy said to Dravot, 'For the Lord's sake, let's get out of this before our heads are chopped off.' And with that they killed the camels all along the mountains, not having anything in particular to eat, but first they took off the boxes with the guns and the ammunition, till 2 men came along driving 4 mules. Dravot up and dances in front of them singing, 'Sell me 4 mules.' Says the first man, 'If you're rich enough to buy, you're rich enough to rob.' But before ever he could put his hand to his knife, Dravot breaks his neck over his knee and the other party runs away. So Carnehan loaded the mules with rifles that was taken off the camels, and together we starts forward into those bitter cold mountainous parts, and never a road broader than the back of your hand." He paused for a moment while I asked him if he could remember the nature of the country through which they had journeyed. "I'm telling you as straight as I can, but my head isn't as good as it might be. They drove nails through it to make me hear better how Dravot died. The country was mountainous, and the mules were most contrary, and the inhabitants was dispersed and solitary. They went up and up, and down, and that other party, Carnehan, was imploring of Dravot not to sing and whistle so loud for fear of bringing down the tremendous avalanches. But Dravot says that if a king couldn't sing it wasn't worth being a king, and whacked the mules over the rump and never took no heed for 10 cold days. We came to a big level valley all among the mountains, and the mules was near dead, so we killed 'em, not having anything in special for them or us to eat. We sat upon the boxes and played odd and even with the cartridges that was jolted out. Then 10 men with bows and arrows ran down that valley, chasing 20 men with bows and arrows, and the row was tremendous. They was fair men, fairer than you or me, with yellow hair and remarkable well built. Says Dravot, unpacking the guns, "This is the beginning of the business. We'll fight for the 10 men." And with that he fires 2 rifles at the 20 men and drops one of 'em at 200 yards from the rock where he was sitting. The other men began to run, but Carnehan and Dravot sits on the boxes picking them off at all ranges up and down the valley. Then we goes up to the 10 men that had run across the snow too, and they fires a footy little arrow at us. Dravot he shoots above their heads and they all falls down flat. Then he walks over 'em and kicks 'em, and then he lifts 'em up and shakes hands all round to make 'em friendly like. He calls 'em and gives 'em the boxes to carry, and waves his hand for all the world as though he was king already. They takes the boxes and him across the valley and up the hill into a pine wood on the top, where there was half-a-dozen big stone idols. Dravot he goes to the biggest, a fellow they call Imbra, and lays a rifle and a cartridge at his feet, rubbing his nose respectfully with his own nose, patting him on the head, and nods his head and says, "That's all right, I'm in the know too, and these old Jim-Jams are my friends." Then he opens his mouth and points down it, and when the first man brings him food he says no, and when the second man brings him food he says no, but when one of the old priests and the boss of the village brings him food he says yes, very hearty, and eats it slow. That was how we came to our first village without any trouble, just as though we had tumbled from the skies. But we tumbled from one of those damned rope bridges, you see, and you couldn't expect a man to laugh much after that. "Take some more whisky and go on," I said. "That was the first village you came into. How did you get to be king?" "I wasn't king," said Carnehan. "Dravot, he was the king, and a handsome man he looked, with a gold crown on his head and all. Him and the other party stayed in that village, and every morning Dravot sat by the side of old Imbra, and the people came and worshipped. That was Dravot's order. Then a lot of men came into the valley, and Carnehan and Dravot picks them off with the rifles before they knew where they was, and runs down into the valley and up again the other side and finds another village, same as the first one, and the people all falls down flat on their faces, and Dravot says, 'Now, what is the trouble between you 2 villages?' And the people points to a woman, as fair as you or me, that was carried off, and Dravot takes her back to the first village and counts up the dead. 8 there was. For each dead man Dravot pours a little milk on the ground and waves his arms like a whirligig, and 'That's all right,' says he. Then he and Carnehan takes the big boss of each village by the arm and walks them down the valley, and shows them how to scratch a line with a spear right down the valley, and gives each a sod of turf from both sides of the line. Then all the people comes down and shouts like the devil and all, and Dravot says, 'Go and dig the land and be fruitful and multiply,' which they did, though they didn't understand. Then we asks the names of things in their lingo, bread and water